What if the very person you dismissed, belittled, and brushed aside like an old coffee stain held the strings to your future? Jeff Matthews, a man who wore arrogance as effortlessly as his custom-tailored suits, was about to get a front-row seat to this lesson. At SpinTech, a gleaming cathedral of technology in New York City, power was currency, suits reigned supreme, and the cleaning staff were little more than ghosts haunting the corners. But one ghost wasn't as invisible as Jeff thought. Her name? Emily Dawson. To everyone else, she was just the new cleaner. The uniform, a no-nonsense blue shirt, black pants, and sneakers, fit the role, and her tied-back hair spoke of practicality over flair. She moved through the halls pushing a cleaning cart, her presence barely acknowledged by the employees brushing past her. But behind her quiet demeanor, Emily was far from ordinary. SpinTech wasn't just the place she worked, it was her creation. Years ago, she had poured her soul into building this empire, shaping it with her vision and grit. However, she'd stepped back, handing the reins to her older brother, Paul Dawson, to avoid the suffocating filters people tend to apply when faced with authority. She wanted the truth, the unvarnished, brutal truth about how her company was being run. And now, disguised as a cleaner, she had a front-row seat. What Emily saw wasn't pretty. Jeff Matthews, the acting CEO, was the crown jewel of arrogance. His suit is impeccable. His shoes, glossy enough to blind. His attitude, the kind that made you want to tiptoe through hallways to avoid being caught in his orbit. Employees like Emily? He didn't see them. Not really. On her first day, as Emily carefully swept the hallway outside Jeff's office, he spotted her. His eyes narrowed like a hawk sizing up its prey. "Hey, new girl," he barked, pointing toward the floor. "You missed a spot." Emily glanced at the area he indicated. It was spotless, practically gleaming. She offered a polite smile, nodded, and resumed her work. But Jeff wasn't finished. "You know," he added, stepping closer, his voice dripping with condescension, "you should be grateful for a job like this. Some people would kill to step foot in a place like SpinTech, let alone work here. Don't screw it up." Emily nodded again, her outward demeanor calm, even respectful. But inside, she burned. This was her company, her kingdom, and here stood Jeff Matthews, treating her like a serf. She wanted to remind him, loudly, that she was the one who had built this empire brick by brick. But she didn't. Not yet. Days turned into weeks, and Emily's silent fury simmered just beneath the surface. The employees? Most were dedicated, hardworking, and full of potential. But the leadership, the supposed brain trust steering SpinTech, was a toxic cocktail of arrogance, entitlement, and corruption. At the helm was Jeff, barking orders like a drill sergeant with no regard for the people who kept the wheels turning. His arrogance didn't discriminate. It stung everyone from junior staff to board members. But cleaners? Oh, they were beneath his notice, save for the occasional snide remark. "Too pretty to be a cleaner," he smirked one afternoon, lingering a little too long in the hallway. "Play your cards right, and maybe I'll find you a real job." Emily didn't flinch. She didn't bite. She knew exactly who she was, and that knowledge was her armor. But Jeff wasn't the only problem. Miss Theobald, the head of marketing, strutted through the office like royalty, her words dripping with disdain whenever she addressed the cleaning staff. "You're lucky to even work here," she would say, her tone as icy as the city skyline. And then there was Mr. Carter, head of finance, a man whose love for company credit cards rivaled his disdain for accountability. Personal dinners, luxury flights, 5-star hotels. Carter's expenses could fund an entire department for months. But Jeff's treatment of Emily was the bitter cherry on this sour Sunday. His comments became bolder, his smirks more infuriating, and his presence harder to ignore. One day, he cornered her in the break room, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Listen, Emily," he began, leaning in far closer than was necessary. "You could make your life a lot easier." "Oh, Jeff. You have no idea what storm is coming." If only Jeff Matthews had known who he was threatening that night in the parking lot. His smirk, his condescension, his audacious threats, all aimed at the very woman who held his future in the palm of her hand. But Emily, she kept her cool, though inside, the fire burned hotter than ever. The time for pretending was over. The next morning, SpinTech felt different. A buzz of anticipation filled the air, as if the walls themselves sensed something monumental was about to unfold. Emily walked through the doors, not in the familiar cleaner's uniform, but in a sharp white blazer, black tailored pants, and heels that clicked confidently against the polished floors. Heads turned. Whispers began. Was that the cleaner?
No. Couldn't be.
When she stepped into the boardroom, Jeff barely glanced up, his arrogance firmly intact. But then he did a double take, his smirk returning as he leaned back in his chair. "You lost, sweetheart? This is a board meeting. Probably not your scene." Emily didn't dignify him with an answer. She strode to the head of the table, her presence magnetic, her gaze unwavering. Paul, seated at her side, cleared his throat. "Before we get started, there's someone I'd like to introduce to you all," he began, his voice steady, though a hint of pride seeped through. He turned to Emily and gestured for her to take the floor. The tension in the room was electric, confusion dancing across every face except Emily's. She met their stares with calm confidence, finally letting her words break the silence. "My name is Emily Dawson. I am the founder and sole owner of SpinTech." You could hear a pin drop. The color drained from Jeff's face, his bravado vanishing instantly. I didn't know," he stammered, his voice barely audible. "That much is painfully clear," Emily said, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "For months, I worked undercover in my own company to see what was going on. And what I discovered was nothing short of disgraceful. Mismanagement, corruption, toxic leadership." Her eyes landed on Jeff, pinning him to his seat. "You, Mr. Matthews, harassed me and countless others. You used your position to intimidate and exploit. And you miserably failed to represent the values this company was built on." Jeff opened his mouth to protest, but Paul stood, his expression resolute. "Effective immediately, Jeff Matthews, you're fired. Legal action will follow." The words hit like a gavel, final and uncompromising. 2 security guards entered the room, their presence a stark reminder that this was no negotiation. Jeff's shoulders slumped as they escorted him out, his once arrogant swagger reduced to a hollow shuffle. But Emily wasn't finished. She turned to the rest of the board, her voice steady but firm. "To those who acted with integrity, you have nothing to fear. But for those who contributed to the toxic culture here, your time is up." One by one, she called out names, her words echoing like a drumbeat of justice. By the time she finished, only a handful of faces remained. Faces filled not with fear, but with newfound respect. Emily looked at the team that was left, her tone softening. SpinTech is going to be a place of innovation, respect, and integrity. Starting today, we rebuild, and rebuild they did. Under Emily's leadership, SpinTech became a beacon of excellence, a place where talent thrived and respect wasn't optional. Those who once mocked the new cleaner now stood in awe of her, inspired by her resilience and vision. Karma had struck, and justice had been served. Emily Dawson reclaimed her throne, her company, and her legacy. SpinTech was hers again, stronger than ever.